Yeah, we'll get into some of the
Okay.
who it hits type of things.
Yeah.
I updated our calendar.
Yeah, we'll get into some of the. Oops, I got my YouTube playing. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us again for SEO Fight Club. And I want to let you know that we are watching YouTube comments. So if you have questions, please feel free to ask them in YouTube. And we'll keep an eye out for those. And let's see, let me get back to my other screens. All right, so we don't have a big presentation today. We're just going to talk about SEO and recent developments. And if people have questions, cool. And if they don't, that's all right too. But Carolyn, what's going on with the podcast?
Topic decisions. And one of them I think you're going to expand on today, which will be very useful, and see which direction that one goes in. But, you know, truthfully, I'm finding out some massively cool things in the index detector beyond indexation. And a lot of cool things about Search Console, like group behavior that I didn't know about or notice before. So I think I might share a little bit of that on the podcast.
That's what happens when you start collecting data for months on end. Start to show up.
I know, it's pretty exciting. And I mean, it's almost like somebody at Google's getting organized. So I'm starting to see timing patterns. And so I'll just say this for today, if you have any SEO tests running, it might be a good day to check them.
Well, that's a good tip. So yeah, I'll definitely be checking out the show on Friday. So any insights you want to share there as well. And you are in your second season of doing this podcast. And a lot of people don't know that it takes a ton of effort and work to do. And you have a sponsorship page where for like the cost of a cup of coffee per month, people can help sponsor your show, right?
Yes, I do, Ted. Thank you.
And can you share the location of that sponsorship page?
I'm pretty sure it's, bit.ly/confessions sponsors. But let me double check.
Yeah, and it's literally like the cost of a cup of coffee per month, and you can help keep this show going and help keep this SEO content coming. And so, yeah, help out Carolyn's podcast. It's on every platform, and making SEO content, especially at this kind of technical level, is really hard to do, and not many people do it well. And the people who try, they don't last. And so everything you can do to help keep this going is going to be, it's going to be a help to you, because this is research and information about Google indexing and other aspects of SEO. So, check it out. You can find the podcast simply by Googling Confessions of an SEO. And, your support matters. All right. So with that, we're going to get into our topic, which is no topic. So we're going to talk about anything. And so the first thing I want to talk about is that Google is taking away the parameter tool, which is a legacy Search Console feature. And what that tool does is it tells Googlebot to ignore certain URL parameters in your website. And so a lot of older e-commerce websites have gone in there and configured Google to ignore their faceted navigation. All of that is about to blow up in your face after April 26th. then all of those become infinite crawls in Googlebot again. So if you have an older, online retail website or some sort of a custom developed thing that relies on those URL parameters, and you have entries in that legacy SEO feature for URL parameters, all of that is a ticking time bomb at this point. And so now it's going to get interesting, because most SEOs don't know what's hidden in those settings. Most SEOs are going to discover that some percentage of their client portfolio is going to be impacted by this, and they had no idea, because they're not going into their client's search console, going into the legacy webmaster tools and looking at what's configured in there. And if you haven't done that for all of your clients, you don't know if there are surprises that are going to pop up on the 26th. So even if you're an SEO with clients and not an online retailer, if you don't go and check for each of your clients, this may still blow up in your face. And so Google's saying it's no big deal, it's a tiny amount of websites, but I guarantee 100% of the websites that have settings configured in this part of Search Console are gonna break when this happens, because they all created those entries because they had a problem. And so all those problems come back to life the second Google stops supporting it. So even though it's a minority of modern websites, every single website configured to use that did it because they had an issue.
All right,
That
Ted, so
issue's coming back.
let's keep this simple because I know I'm not an e-commerce guy, so I can ask the dumb questions. So can you give me an example of where a parameterized URL would be utilized on an e-commerce site, and then what happens in Search Console and what's going to happen after this goes away?
So here's what Googlebot is going to do on these parameter-driven sites. So Googlebot comes to the online store's homepage and says, wow, it's an online store. This is great. We're Google. We love online stores. Look, they have a socks category. Let's go into the socks category. So Googlebot goes into the socks category and says, look, there's a lot of navigation links here. Let's click this one. It says sort by price. So it looks at the socks sorted by price and goes, wow, this is fantastic. Look at this one. This link here says, show me the red socks. It clicks that link and now it's looking at all the red socks. Holy cow, what? I can sort the red socks by price? This is awesome. Let's sort the red socks by price. Okay, wow. Oh, here's a link for the socks that are blue. Blue socks. Wow, I can sort the blue socks by price ascending. So what ends up happening is Googlebot stays in that socks category doing the Cartesian product of all the different sorts and filters, and it never escapes, and it stays in there and it says, oh, crawl budget achieved. I can't do any more of your website. I spent all my time sorting and filtering your socks. And you get 5% of your site index because you had an infinite crawl for Googlebot. And so what people did was they went into that URL parameter tool and they said, Google, please ignore the sort parameter. Please ignore the color filter parameter. Please ignore. And so because of that, Google would get complete crawls of these online retailers. They would ignore those Cartesian products. Now Google isn't going to support that anymore. And so for all those legacy sites that are using URL parameters for their faceted navigation and tracking codes and this little trick and that little trick, all that stuff that was poor web development. That's what it is. The way you fix it is you develop your store to use RESTful URLs and not to be parameter driven. You know, all those poor web development decisions that became acceptable because there was this parameter solution in Google, the cost of that decision is now going to hit you in the face. And so all these websites aren't going to have that solution anymore. Their SEO is going to go to garbage, and they're going to have to redevelop their websites to fix the problem. And it's going to be very expensive, and it's going to be very urgent after the 26th.
So right now, if I had mysite.com/socks, and then I have mysite.com/socks, color equals red, color equals blue, that's 3 different URLs that then would essentially be duplicate.
Yeah.
So I don't get any love or any additional advantage. I don't get a rank for blue socks, red socks, because those are parameters, because they're all going to filter out back to the page. So you've crawled 10,000 iterations of that page and given me one.
Yeah, there are different ways to Cartesian product by URL, but if you're doing the proper web development, you don't do that. You don't create these types of problems. Like you could create those sorts and filters as form buttons that Google will never follow. You could do those as JavaScript requests that aren't links, you know, clickable elements that aren't anchor tags that Google's going to follow. You could create you know, a part of your code that says, if it's Googlebot, don't even draw the faceted navigation on the screen, which I think is the absolute best solution, but it requires custom development, because then Google can do no wrong. If it's not even there to interact with for even the possibility of interaction with Googlebot, then it's just better. Don't even draw it on the page if it's Googlebot. You know, there's you know, a number of ways to handle it properly, and the problem is the people who relied on that tool didn't want to spend the time and resources to solve the problem back in the day. And now those problems are going to come back for them, and they're going to be looking at doing it now instead.
So you're saying that if my site is built like that, I have basically a month to re-engineer the structure so that I'm not impacted by that decision, or there's going to be hell to pay.
If you have any load-bearing parameters currently configured in that legacy part of Google, you have work to do. So yeah.
Where would you find that in Search Console? Like if you inherited something,
All right,
an SEO, and you weren't part of the decision making, how would you even know?
you would have to have access to their Search Console, and let me refresh where the links are and what they're called currently. So you would log into Search Console, you'd go to the client website, and there would be legacy tools and reports and URL parameters in the navigation. And then when you click on that, you will see an important announcement. This report will not be available after April 26, 2022. And then below that announcement, there's an add parameter. And this feature has always been, you know, a glass solution that's very easy to break and to use incorrectly, and to overuse accidentally, and to underuse accidentally. And so I get why Google wants to deprecate it, because using this feature has also been a path to shooting yourself in the foot. But it's a very short time limit that it's just going away. So it's really the rug being ripped out from underneath you. You have a few weeks to solve anything you have configured in this system. And that's not a lot of time. When you talk about web development, that's not a lot of time at all. So yeah, and you have to go client by client and make sure that they have nothing in there configured, and anything they do have configured probably needs web development to correct.
So Terry had commented, this looks like a great opportunity. So where do you see the opportunity in this, Ted?
Oh yeah, for people that do web development, I mean, you can basically look for websites that are ranking with parameters in their URLs. And that becomes a lead list for your web development company. These are going to be businesses that are going to have big problems. You can cite this announcement by Google that this is going away, and this parameter driven architecture is going to cause SEO problems. And now all of a sudden you have urgent customers, you have a Google verified problem that needs web development as a solution, and you can find them with creative searches. And it's a boon for web development companies.
And you're saying the report itself, like to know specifically what you have, is going to go away as well?
Yeah, I don't know how Google is gonna, take it away. They might leave it, but it won't function. But yeah, they could just take it away and you're blind as to what was there before. So you may even want to take snapshots of what's configured in case it all vanishes on you. Because if you're using it to keep track of what parts of the website need fixing, it may disappear, and then what are you going to reference? And one of the things that you should do if you have a website that's configured this way is you should look at your web server web logs as to how Googlebot crawls these types of pages, because you'll see the Cartesian product and the URLs they select to visit. So, there may be part of the problem that was never addressed that's still hidden in those web logs. So yeah, it's a bit alarmist, but this announcement is a bit alarming. So
It's a very cheery Fight Club today.
yeah.
Well,
So as an SEO, if you want to be on top of it, you go through each client, go to the legacy tools section, go to URL parameters. If it's totally empty, you don't need to necessarily worry about that client. But if they have anything at all configured in there, that's cause for alarm.
yikes.
And you probably have to act on that stuff quickly and sort it out, because you have a matter of weeks before Google doesn't honor it anymore.
This is analogous to you coming out and saying, hey, Google dropped an announcement that they're no longer going to support WordPress.
Yeah. Rebuild your websites. We do support websites. We're just not going to support WordPress.
Mhm.
You have 2 weeks. That would totally suck. And it's like that, but it's not actually that bad. Well, actually, it might be worse in many regards. Because e-com development is always, time consuming and expensive, and this is largely going to hit online retailers. Yeah, and it's largely going to hit online retailers with old web development, old stores, and it's going to hit online retailers with custom development where the web developers kind of invented their own way of doing things. And so those two groups of scenarios are probably going to be hit really hard by this change, because those are the two groups that probably rely very heavily on that feature.
On the plus side, at least they didn't announce this in October.
Yeah, you do have time before Black Friday, but being forced into a e-commerce web development overhaul is a very stressful and often expensive endeavor. So it's, doing it with this little notice is not a friendly action on Google's part. I'm guessing something that they're doing is forcing their hand and they have no choice because of some bigger change they're making. And, fundamentally, this is a big change to how Googlebot performs and behaves. So you could also take this as an announcement that after the 26th, you can expect Googlebot to have some fashion of different behaviors.
Okay, what would different bot behaviors look like? Ask the person who looks at bot behavior.
Well, for one, they're not going to ignore those URL parameters anymore. That's the big thing. Some part of Googlebot is fundamentally changing where that's not going to be part of what Googlebot does. And so that part of the code is being cut away for some reason. I don't know what the reasons are, and I don't know the extent of how Googlebot will change, but we know that they're tampering with that part of the code to remove this capability. So
I would love to set a site up now that has them and then wait till after the 26th and see what happens.
yeah, that would be an interesting canary in the coal mine, because if Google is still ignoring those parameters, something about their deployment, like, well, they didn't deploy on time.
Only SEO testers would go and build your own train wreck.
Yeah. You want to watch the collision in slow motion.
Exactly.
I like it.
Yep. So two things. One, could they be doing this to shrink the size of the primary index?
No. This is actually kind of a crazy thing conceptually, because they're uncorking these infinite crawls. By removing this feature, they are potentially uncorking the infinite crawl, and that's a big waste of resources if Google doesn't have an alternative solution. So I would wager that Google thinks they have some type of a better way of detecting this and handling this. Now, is it actually better? We don't know. Will it work? Will it work great? Will it work poorly? We don't know. But it sounds to me like Google is taking away this hard-coded way of addressing it, and they probably have some sort of fairly heavy-handed way of detecting it and doing it on their end. But that could have implications to how your website is crawled and what kind of coverage you get.
The other question is, are you calling an update on April 26th, plus or minus?
Well, I think Google's calling it an update. They're saying after April 26th, Googlebot will crawl your website in a different way than it did prior. That's their announcement in a nutshell. And specifically those parameters you said, hey, Google, please ignore so you can crawl my whole website. Google's not going to ignore them anymore. So let's see. We have one comment. Google often misses dates they've set for sunsetting some of their services. Yeah, they might be late on it, especially if enough people complain. See, we have another comment. We have a few questions here. What is well-known traffic advice for 404? I'm not sure I understand that question. Can you clarify it? And another one, hey guys, I want your opinion on something. Do you think the anchor text ratio counts per page basis or the whole domain? I would wager that the bulk of the effect is at the URL level. For the most part, Google appears to be a URL plus keyword kind of system. So the atomic units of what's happening in Google appear to be based on the combination of a URL and a keyword. So, you know, I would kind of try to look at it that way. We have somebody saying, can you give an example of this URL parameter? Yeah, let me see if I can find a store quickly here. So let me go.
While you're looking at that, Carolyn dropped a nugget. She said, based on the schedule of updates and coverage dates, the 26th would be a perfect date. So I think Carolyn is calling a shot here.
Okay, let me move this over to the correct monitor. Minimize my bookmarks. Share screen. All right, can you see my screen? Okay, so we have a search here. And so the way I'm tracking down people that are likely going to be affected by it, I don't know if they have these configured or not. But if they're doing parameter driven, then this type of text would appear in the URL. So I'm searching for a product and I'm looking for a parameter that says sort equals price. And I can hover over this link and see that it's in the URL. And so I can see that they've done this. And so here's that navigation. And so there'll be different types of faceted navigation to different degrees. But these are the types of things that Google will Cartesian product on, and they don't necessarily give you different content. They just resort the products that are listed on this page. And so it's not different content, and Google spends extra crawl budget exploring all these different sorts and filters that can appear. So that would be an example of one.
Can you click on the sort equals product on that just to see how URL changes?
So now it's sort equals title, same for products, just put them in a different order. Sort by sales, sort by rating. So yeah, you know, and there's a sort direction parameter. So I can sort by rating ascending or descending, you know, so the Cartesian product keeps coming out. And what people would do in the URL parameter field is they would say, Google, ignore the sort parameter, ignore the sort direction parameter. And Google would know to exclude those parts of the URL when comparing, have I been there before? And they go, I'm ignoring those. I have been there before. So don't use crawl budget going there again. But if Google stops ignoring those parameters, then all that extra crawling then comes back into play. So that's how that works. And then if you're a web developer, then this type of searching is how you can find people who potentially have this problem. And so I would probably find people that have a high average cart, because they're going to be heavily impacted by this and probably have better budgets for addressing it quickly. I would also look at whose primary sales season is right around the corner. So if all your business does is, summer products, swimming pool products, you're going to need to fix this before peak season. And so you're going to be hard pressed to do this quickly. And so, yeah, you can target your lead gen if you're a web development firm. So yeah, let me stop the share there. All right, so we have some more questions here. So one of two, I'm reusing test domains for a new test. Are there any steps I need to take to make it a fair test? Yeah, it's easy to spoil a test. And so the primary thing you need to do is to make sure you're actually testing the thing that you're trying to test versus accidentally testing for keyword density, which is the number one mistake. And so that means, if you're testing that keywords and nav tags can help boost a page, you have to count up your word count, you have to count up your keyword count, both of them. And you need to make sure that you're not varying the density from test case to test case, because we do know that density will sort your test cases. There are other things that you need to do now that Google is rewriting titles and summaries in the search results. You need to make sure that Google isn't giving you preferential rankings due to what it's choosing to display from the page. So you need to make sure that you're not spoiling the test with what's appearing in the search results by Google's choice. And that usually means that you need to no snippet somehow the part containing the keywords. So look into the no snippet, the data no snippet attribute, and research how that works. And that way you can force Google to not put extra keyword mentions into those zones where they would impact the rankings. And we do see that text selection that Google makes impacting rankings all the time. We think it is currently how people make mistakes in keyword density testing. It's not accounting for that. And when you account for that, then you get proper density sorting.
Another one, just so people are looking at, if you're reusing domains for testing, one of the other things is if you've done link testing and some of your domains have backlinks built to them and some don't, that can also impact your pages that you're doing across domains as well, depending on how they're configured.
Yeah, and even when you have gibberish domain names, you really have to explore their history. I was doing random letter domains that couldn't possibly be words, they're random letters. I was wrong. It was a former telco company in China. And it totally spoiled tests for that domain every time.
But it had amazing indexation.
It did. Everyone got indexed, and it was incredible, but it was an outlier compared to the other test pages every time. So you got to be careful about your test domains in that regard. Let's see, someone's asking, should these parameters be no follow? I don't think you can no follow specific parameters. The parameter utility in Search Console was kind of your way of no following those parameters. I guess you could be asking the links specifically, but those are a tip, and Googlebot doesn't necessarily honor those. And if Googlebot's going to waste your crawl budget following those despite your no follow tip, I mean, that's not good for you, right? That doesn't hurt Google, that hurts you. So, I still stand by my opinion that the best way to solve infinite crawls is to not draw the faceted navigation at all if it's a Googlebot user agent. Just don't give them the option to even go the wrong way. Let's see, he's asking, do I need to make all the test cases on the different domains identical? No, you don't want duplicate content. They should be unique content, but tuned to the exact same degree. So they should all be 2,000 random words at 2% density with one keyword mention and a nav tag. But other than that, the content is identical to each page, unique to each page, not identical to each page. And that way they all get indexed, they all can rank, they're all tuned to the same standard, and then you can see. Yeah. So, Carolyn, what do you think about Google's, pulling the plug on the parameter tool? How do you think that might impact small business owners who just don't know better?
Right, they won't know better. And if they hired an SEO, they will blame their SEO for whatever happens. Like, it's not going to say this happened because Google took this tool away. It's because a decision was made before even the SEO was there, perhaps.
Yeah, this was all built upon a decision about how the business owner wanted their website built. So this was a architecture decision on how to build that website, and now it's going to come back and have a heavy price.
It's interesting too, from like a forensic SEO standpoint, because it's like another thing to check for when you walk into a situation and all hell's breaking loose and you're like, did anybody,
Well, this has kind of been the bane of many SEOs' existence. They take on a client who has a website built this way, and it would be a total nightmare for them because they couldn't get complete crawls of the website, and things wouldn't rank and updates wouldn't take, and they get yelled at and called a terrible SEO because of this type of architecture decision.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of good that Google isn't going to help it continue to exist. So it becomes a better world after. But there are people who decided to go this route who are going to have a terribly painful transition after April 26th. Yeah. And so that's unfortunate, but, decisions, choices have consequences, And this is one place where they went cheap, or they opted to let the developer make all the choices. They abdicated their authority to a web developer who said, this is the way I'm going to do it. I don't care that you're paying the bills. And now that's going to come back and have a heavy price.
Happy spring, everybody.
Yeah.
Q2 sucks.
Well, it only affects those who were relying on it.
True,
And
true.
Those websites know who they are. They have things configured there because they had a problem. You don't configure that part of Search Console for no reason.
Right.
You only do it if you're desperate for a solution. And so if there's anything in there at all that's load bearing, you've got a lot of urgent work to do. All right, let's see. We have another question. Forgive my beginner question, but is there a way of tracking which pages on my site have the highest number of clickbacks to the search page? So you're probably talking about the organic bounce back to search. So you'd want to filter by the organic medium and Google Analytics and look at the bounce back to rate. So you'd find the entries, the organic entries that are one or more, and then look at the bounce rate of that collection. So it's doable in analytics, but you have to play with analytics to get it down to just the traffic you want to analyze, which is organic traffic that's bouncing. I mean, a visitor comes to my site from Google and Bing. Yeah, so Google Analytics will have a source medium. So the medium will be organic and the source will be Google, or the source will be Bing, or the source will be Ask, or the source will be DuckDuckGo. But it'll all be organic, and you should be able to break it down by the various sources of organic. And so, yeah, you know, it can be tracked. Yeah, you have to, when you start to do things like that, you're looking at making custom reports in Google Analytics mostly. So you should be able to make a custom report, and it's good to learn to experiment with those features because you can do a lot of really cool things with those features. All right, so we're at 9:43, and I think we're out of questions. Any other topics or anything?
I've got a quick one. I know, Carolyn, you've done so much work on indexing and stuff like that. If I were curious about the work that you've done, where can I find it?
Okay. I guess you could search for Google Index Detector, and it's the top result in there. And it's on American Way Media, and I have the spreadsheet in there. You can see the most recent data in there. And I've started doing a daily crawl or no crawl report, which is exciting.
Cool.
But I'm literally sort of saying, like, here's what I see today. Here's how the test pages are responding. This is what's happening in the bots. How many are they desktop? Are they mobile? Was there anything fun in there? And which is why, like, today I would say is a good day to check your tests, because there's not a lot of bots in there. So there's low activity, and we're seeing a slightly elevated volatility in SEMrush. So that would lead me to think that they're pushing out stuff that they've recalculated, but are choosing now to push forward in the, let's say, the primary index. So I'm trying to, like, get a little more subtlety and viewing it. So doing it every day actually helps me sort of see that. So that if people want to find that on YouTube, you can subscribe, but it's just crawl or no crawl YouTube. And once I get 100 subscribers, I can name the channel. So for now, just search for it by its name and you'll find it.
So if you want a daily indexing weather report, that's where we'd find it.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't go that far, but it's raw data. Let's put it that way. Yeah. So it may be, it may not be, but the latest thing I'm calling is on Wednesday, we should see another Search Console update. And the date should likely be yesterday's date, the 28th. So I'm trying to get some crowdsourcing data, like if people are in their Search Consoles, I'm asking that they let me know, because I'm pretty sure we're still all together.
Yeah, my Search Console data aligns with what you've been saying.
Cool. I know.
Which makes me think you've hacked into my Search Console, Carolyn. You've hacked into my Search Console.
I did not.
We have a few last minute comments here. We have a why does Google hate us? Google Analytics 4. I try not to get emotional about it. It's like, yeah, they're forcing you into another change there too. So yeah, that's another large body of work that largely impacts online retailers. I don't know a lot about the gripes in Google Analytics 4. In my opinion, the accuracy of the data they had before was pretty abysmal. So hopefully it's a better product after this change. I would hope. So I try not to get too emotional about it. It's just going to be an expensive thing that everyone has to do. And we all just have to hope it's better or switch to a different logging solution. That's all I really know about it at this point. We have somebody commenting that they're loving the crawl or no crawl videos. So keep that up. We have a question: why backlinks are not crawled? How about look at external link in a page? Well, it's, if I had to guess, I'd say that this is referring to, I submitted a page in Search Console and it had links to other pages and Google didn't go to those other pages. And sometimes we notice in testing that when we try to index that way, Google will disable the crawling off of submitted URLs. So you could submit the URL itself will get visited and updated in search, but it won't get crawled. The pages it links to won't get the love of being crawled and indexed. And it's kind of a clue that there are different channels to how Google is processing things that get updated and indexed. So, already existing pages might get crawled, but new pages might not. They could suspend that, they could slow it down. They could say when it's via the Google Search Console avenue, it's disabled, but if we find it through sitemaps, it'll still get crawled. All of those channels can be configured and can behave differently. And that's what we tend to see. So depending upon which channel of getting indexed and crawled you're going down, maybe that one's impacted, but a different path would get you what you need. So if you're relying on only one path to getting crawled and indexed, maybe try a different path. What do you think, Carolyn?
Definitely. And another piece to the puzzle that we're not used to having to break apart is it new content or is it updated existing content? They are treated in what I'm looking at, they are treated very differently.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It seems to be harder to get new URLs indexed, and it seems relatively easy to update an existing page. And that's why you get a lot of SEOs in the various groups, they'll be saying, oh, indexing is so terrible, I can't get anything indexed. And right next to it, you'll have someone saying, I just indexed 800 pages. I had no problem at all. The truth is, depending on the path and that scenario of new pages versus page updates, both can be true, and it gets really confusing. So someone wants to know, Carolyn, when you're launching your test site indexation service. So I'd like to know when you do that too. You should make an announcement.
Oh, yeah.
And there's another ask, can we get a Fight Club podcast? It actually started as a podcast, but all my viewership was on YouTube, so it didn't make any sense to keep putting in all that work on the podcast side. I thought the podcast would have been nicer, but I also had the constant problem of saying on the podcast, if you look at figure 4, you can clearly see, and that stuff just fell apart every time. So it's hard to do the show format in audio only. Let's see, we have another question. Does that mean we should use the same URL set for testing? I've often thought about that. Should I create 1,000 test pages and then only test on the ones that are already indexed? Just reuse, just these kind of blank slate pages for testing, but only use the ones we know work. Because the problem is we create pages and we hope they get indexed, and then when they don't, our test is shot. So maybe if you start with already indexed blank slates, maybe that gives you a testing advantage. I haven't tried it, but I've often wondered about it. LSI keywords is a must. No, it's not a must. You can get things to work without a particular SEO tactic. One tactic probably isn't going to make or break you. The thing about LSI, the main reason like people are upset about them is because the term LSI, the acronym LSI, was inappropriately co-opted from a different area of academics. So it's kind of a misnomer in the SEO space. But what's meant by LSI keywords is words that co-occur on pages that rank well. And another type of word that co-occurs on pages that rank well are entities. And so entities are nouns that Google's AI understands, and collections of entities form topics. So to use Lee's example, if I said crust, apple, cook time, sugar, flour, what am I talking about? I'm talking about apple pie. So those entities form the apple pie topic. And so we know those things work in search, and they're co-occurring terms on pages that rank well. The difference between entities and LSI is LSI are co-occurring terms that are discovered statistically, and entities are co-occurring terms that are discovered through NLP processing. They both have a lot of overlap. The entity databases are typically only available to about a dozen languages. So if you aren't in that dozen languages that gets those databases, then you have no choice but to use LSI. So if you have a customer in Vietnam, your best way of getting entities on the page is to use the LSI tool sets. And so it's not a must, it's a tool, and it has a place and a reason for being. And I don't get mad at tools. That's silly. I don't get angry at a hammer because I like screwdrivers better. That's silly. Let's see, another question here talking about indexing. Do you think they will close the loopholes used by Rank Math and Index Me Now? Sure, if they don't want new content in search, they got to give us something, and so I don't think we care what that something is. Google could make the new legitimacy page checking service. Go and register your page at legitimacy.com to make sure that it's a legitimate web page. And once you pass that scrutiny, then you're in search. Fine. Do whatever you want to do, Google. You have to give us some way of getting content into search. Otherwise, your search is not search.
Right.
So pick whatever method you want. We'll use that. But I doubt they'd break those things. They work pretty hard to build those paths, and I bet they hate redoing work too. Let's see. Terry's asking, can you see my screen? And I wasn't paying attention.
That was a podcast comment.
Sorry. Caught that one late. Missed the joke. All right. All right. With that, let's call it a show. We're coming up on the hour here. So thank you, everyone. And going out the door, just remember to check out Confessions of an SEO. It airs on Friday mornings. What time, Carolyn?
8 a.m. Central Standard Time.
There you go. Every week. And the episodes are short and sweet. They tend to be 10 to 15 minutes. So they're easy to consume on your drive into work. Paul's asking about the job API. Yeah, Google had some nonsense like that going on, and then there was an exploit that allowed you to index anything, and will that be closed? And whatever Google ends up doing, they need to give you some way to get your content into search. Otherwise, it's not search. You're using the wrong word at that point. So if they want to still be in the search business, they have to be able to find pages that match keywords, because that's what search is. And so if they give you no option to participate, it's not search anymore. It's something else. So, all right. Take care, everyone. Thank you for joining us.